On February 10th, 1962 in Los Angeles, Jim Beatty became the first man in history to run a mile indoors in under 4 minutes. Fascinating is how he prepared for it. 3 times a week, he'd step into a squat rack, not to squat, but to push against an immovable bar, holding maximal tension for just 6 seconds at a time. No movement, just pure max force. It was isometric training, an approach that seemed almost too simple to work, yet it set Beatty apart from all the other runners at the time. Today, more than 60 years later, sports science is evolving again. There are 3 new methods of isometric training that can unlock new levels of speed, strength, and performance. And chances are you haven't even heard of them yet. So today, we're breaking down the new science of isometrics. First, we'll cover how isometric training compares to traditional strength training and how and when to use each. Next, we'll cover the 3 methods of isometric training that athletes are using to peak athleticism. Then we'll cover sets, reps, rest time, and more. So let's go ahead and dive into it. Okay, so to start off, research like this does a great job of summarizing the main differences between traditional strength training and isometric training. Traditional strength training involves lifting weights up and down with concentric and eccentric muscle actions. There are a few things that traditional training is much better for than isometric training. One of the main ones being muscle hypertrophy. When compared head to head, traditional strength training provides more muscle hypertrophy than isometric training. So if that's your only goal, then this is a good time to head over to Renaissance Periodization and watch Dr. Mike lose his mind trying to understand why an athlete would throw a med ball before promoting his hypertrophy app. But maybe you see that there's more to developing athletes than just muscle hypertrophy. In fact, isometric training provides gains in max strength and force output without muscle hypertrophy. This is one of the reasons it's so effective for athletes who need strength without excessive size, like runners and triathletes, or wrestlers and MMA athletes. So in comparison to traditional strength training methods, the research consistently shows us that isometric training creates higher motor unit recruitment with less mechanical damage and muscle soreness. This leads to shorter recovery times and less interference with running, sport training, or conditioning work. Isometric training can also provide higher rates of force development, particularly with the new methods that we're about to cover. Lastly, there's emerging evidence that longer duration isometrics provide a unique benefit for collagen synthesis and tendon strength. So with all that said, let's dive into the specific methods that you can use to get these benefits. So here are the 3 new methods of isometric training. Number 1 is the iso push, number 2 is the iso switch, and number 3 is the iso catch. These are new methods because if we look at the history of isometric training, these weren't widely utilized. In the 1960s and 70s, it was quite popular to do isometrics for 6 to 10 seconds against a barbell fixed into a rack. The isometric researchers of the modern day though, like Dr. Alex Natera, have introduced a new 3 to 5 second isometric training protocol that yields even better results. So let's break them down. First, we have the iso push. This is a simple overcoming isometric pushing into a fixed barbell. You can do this by either placing a barbell under the spotter arms or loading it so heavy that it won't move. And although this exercise has been around for a while, the specific protocol is new. If you push as hard as you can into a fixed barbell, you can maintain near maximal force for about 10 seconds before you see force drop off. Historically, athletes have trained with 6 to 10 second maximal contractions, but the new research is suggesting that it may be more beneficial to utilize 3 to 5 second contractions. The scientific term for this is repetition duration reserve. When you push for 10 seconds, that's 100% of your repetition duration reserve, basically going all the way to failure. And once you do that, it's really hard to get the same neuromuscular output again. By contrast, if you produce max effort for just 3 to 5 seconds, then you can repeat it multiple times. Specifically, a great set and rep range for athletes using the iso push is this: 3 sets of 3 reps of a 4-second isometric hold. In total, it's just 72 seconds of work. And then if you're wondering how much rest to take in between sets, I would recommend about 1 to 2 minutes. Now, it doesn't look like you're doing much since you're not moving, but you'll have accumulated 72 seconds of near maximal motor unit recruitment, and you'll have done it without much muscle damage or associated soreness. This is the exact protocol that Olympic runners have utilized leading up to the Olympics, and it's the protocol that I use with professional runners and triathletes that I train online. Months before a big race, we're doing heavy squats and split squats, but in the 6 weeks leading up to an A race, I shift programming to prioritize isometrics to get the force output without the associated soreness. And this is a good time to mention that if you are enjoying the video and all the work that goes into making it, I'd really appreciate if you could take a second to hit that like button and drop a comment below like, I learned something today. I always appreciate seeing those. And then lastly, I'm going to leave a link in the description below to get a discount on our new 12-week speed program. It's a great program for advanced athletes looking to build speed. You can use code SPRINT30 for 30% off. Okay, now let's move on to method number 2, the ISO switch. Here's what an ISO switch can look like. You can sort of think of this as a combination of a speed drill like an A skip or wall acceleration and a calf raise. In this ankle ISO switch, the athlete is going to be in a calf raise isometric position with the opposite knee up. It's really challenging to just hold this position, so it's important to mention that athletes should get strong and practice just this position with an ISO push before they progress to this ISO switch. The switch really is exactly what it sounds like though. You're going to quickly switch legs. I tested this on force plates, and the peak forces and rate of force development from the ISO switch are even higher than the max ISO push. The ISO push produced a max force of 2,383 newtons, and the ISO switch produced a 17% higher 2,790 newtons of force. So I sort of think of this as switching the stimulus from strength to power. Rather than 4 seconds of maximal holds, you're getting a really sharp and powerful peak, which can be great for training sprinters or field sport athletes who want to sprint faster. We did this with both a fixed barbell in a rack and a heavy loaded Smith machine, and I found that the Smith machine felt better. So this setup that you're seeing right now is what I would recommend for the ISO switch. And for the specific protocol to use, I would recommend 3 to 5 sets of 4 to 6 seconds of continuous switching. Basically getting into a position and then switching back and forth about 10 times in 4 to 6 seconds, and then resting for about a minute or 2 before repeating for 3 to 5 total sets. All right, and then moving on, our last method is gonna be the ISO catch. And this is the most advanced isometric yet. This is similar to the ISO switch, but with a flight phase where neither foot is in contact with the ground. I really like this for the hip ISO catch. It creates a sharp peak hamstring contraction. Furthermore, it gets that peak hamstring contraction in a lengthened position. This is a great way to prepare for sprinting, and I've worked up to this with athletes who struggle with recurring hamstring strains. I would highly recommend going through a full progression leading up to this, from a glute bridge to a single leg glute bridge to a long lever glute bridge, really building up that hamstring strength in that long length position. Then to a single leg long lever bridge, then to a heel elevated long lever bridge. I like to work up to 20-second holds with good form at each level before moving on. Then finally to the hip ISO push, the hip ISO switch, and the hip ISO catch. And you can use the same protocol for the hip ISO switch as the hip ISO catch. 3 to 5 sets of about 10 reps, quickly switching back and forth. So to summarize, isometric training has been helping athletes improve performance since the 1960s. And now, force plates and accurate measures of fatigue mechanisms have allowed us to understand new methods of isometric training like the ISO push, the ISO switch, and the ISO catch that can be uniquely beneficial for athletes. If you want to try these methods out for yourself or your athletes, you can check out our new 12-week speed program. It includes everything that you need to get faster with progressive sprint training, plyometrics, overcoming isometrics, resistance training, mobility work, and more. You can get 30% off for a limited time with code SPRINT30. I hope you learned something today. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.